The final passenger train to Portland crosses the Radipo Lake Viaduct, Weymouth in March 1965. This was the last of 3 special passenger trains run that day to mark the complete closure of the line. Regular passenger services had ceased in March 1952, the line having remained open for freight traffic. And so to the terminus of the line at Easton, on the island of Portland, the final train climbs the steep gradient into the station. Viewed from the same position today, the entire site of the station and goods yard is now occupied by Lady Mead Hall sheltered accommodation. A view from the bridge near the Mermaid Inn, Wakem, looking up the disused cutting towards Easton. And looking back down the line from Easton, the footpath going away to the centre of the picture is the site of a siding into the Perryford works of a South Western Roadstone Company. The old Bottom Combe quarry site. Victoria Square today, the original terminus of the line, was here. Today a large roundabout and the entrance to the Naval Air Station occupy the site. Whilst back at White Regis, the Whitehead Torpedo Factory, now Wellworthy Engineering, and the Gap, where the railway crossed the Fleet on a girder bridge. We swing round and look across Chesil Beach towards the island. The railway ran across the causeway, now taken back by nature. At Rodwell, once one of the prettiest stations in Dorset, the platforms now disappearing as nature reclaims the embankments. The line is now a public footpath between White Regis and Weymouth. Through the short tunnel under White Road and out onto the Marsh embankment. This earthwork caused considerable engineering difficulties during the construction of the line. The remains of Westham Holt. Here the earthworks end. From here on the line has been obliterated. New roundabouts, part of the Weymouth bypass and a new road bridge over Radipo Lake have taken the place of the railway. In the background the red building of B&Q stands on the site of the former Weymouth Station goods shed. And as we move to the right of the picture, we can see the remains of the platform of Melcombe Regis Station, which after 1909 was the terminus of all Portland trains. The railway first arrived at Weymouth in January 1857, the Weymouth Harbour Tramway and the Portland branch being opened in October 1865, branching off at Weymouth Junction. Until 1909, all trains had to reverse in and out of Weymouth Station from a junction. In that year, Melcombe Regis Station was built. Thus all trains could terminate at the junction, passengers boarding and alighting at Melcombe Regis. Across Radipo Lake, Littlefield Crossing, Westham Holt opened in 1909. Through Rodwell Tunnel to Rodwell, opened in 1870. Foot Castle Holt was opened in 1932 to serve the popular beauty spot nearby. White Regis Holt opened in 1909, then across the causeway to Portland. The later goods station was the original terminus when the line opened in 1865. From this point the line continued from Portland Goods Junction around to Castletown as a siding worked by horses. The new passenger station was opened in 1905, following the opening of the Eastern Line to passenger traffic in 1902. In 1878, a line had been opened to Portland Dockyard from Castletown siding. Part of this was used by the Eastern Line, we see here climbing around the eastern side of the island, before curving around to Eastern Station in the centre of the island. The original line was going to run from quarries at Sheepcroft through Easton to Perryfield and down an incline over the cliffs south of Church Oak Cove and load stone into boats. However, this scheme was superseded by the idea of building a line to join the Weymouth line, eventually opening in 1900 to goods traffic and 1902 to passenger traffic. We now look at the Merchants Railway. This opened in 1825 and was horse-drawn with a track gauge of 4 foot 4.5 inches, with an incline on the north face of the island. Today, all that is left of the incline are a few of the original stone sleepers which still survive. On the top of the incline, a view of the heliport, the oil fuel tanks and the site of the former Portland Railway Station. At Tillicombe, the archways of the 3 levels of the Merchants Railway can still be clearly seen. Looking from the top of New Ground down through the archways of one of the inclines. Behind Tillicombe, the lines ran around the outer earthworks of the Verne before descending the incline to Portland Harbour. We will now take a more detailed look at the history of the railways of this very fascinating island off the South Dorset coast. Prior to 1839 there was no bridge connecting the island to the mainland, as shown in this painting by Upham. There was just a ferry boat on a length of rope. All stone, the principal trade of the island, had to leave by sea. In the early 1820s, the Portland Railway Company was formed. This was a private company to provide a horse-drawn tramway to bring stone down from the top of the island to sea level. Here we see the horses at Priory Corner with the primitive wagons in the background. The various levels above Tillicombe. A loaded wagon about to descend from the top of the incline. This was operated by a wire on a brake drum, the loaded wagons descending the incline, hauling the empty wagons up, the speed being controlled by the brake drum. A view from the bottom of the incline, the horse to the left proceeding towards Castletown Pier where the stone was loaded into boats, the wagons to the right going to Castletown Yard. A 1920s view of a steamer loading stone at Castletown Pier. An earlier view of Castletown Pier showing small warships in the background. Beyond these the coal hulks of the Portland Coaling Company. The exchange sidings in Castletown Yard. Standard gauge wagons stand either side of a narrow gauge wagon under the gantry. The railway closed with the outbreak of war in 1939. Now only Castletown Pier remains for shipping stone brought down in lorries, although some dry stone arches still survive in quarries as a memorial to this very interesting line. A delightful shot of quarrymen with one of the narrow gauge wagons. Overburden being removed from quarries on the west side of the island owned by Barnes. Employed was a small 2-foot gauge locomotive, Excelsior. Portland Breakwater forming the largest man-made harbour in the world. This work started in the 1830s, the outer breakwater being completed by 1872. Stone for its construction was brought down from the quarries on the east side of the island. Here shown is one of the original 7-foot gauge locomotives used to propel wagons onto the staging used during the breakwater's construction. Prisoners housed in what is now the Borstal worked the quarries hewing the stone for the breakwater's construction. A view of the incline leading down to the breakwater. The buildings on the right are where the entrance now stand of HMS Osprey. And a close-up view of one of the overhead brake drums used on the 3-part incline. The incline was re-gauged from 7-foot to standard gauge, and at the turn of a century construction took place of both the centre and northern breakwaters. The railway in the dockyard had been linked in 1878 to the Weymouth to Portland branch, its construction shown here taking place near Castletown. The dockyard had grown, and as can be clearly seen, the dockyard railway was complete with signals. One of the tipping ramps used for tipping stone into barges for taking to the breakwater. Also during construction of the central and northern arms, stone was transferred into barges loaded by steam cranes from a jetty in the dockyard. Once in the barges and the barge was in position over the site, the stone was tipped into the sea until the surface was reached. It was then craned onto the breakwater as shown here for the final part of the breakwater's construction. Steam locomotives remained active in the dockyard until 1961, one in its final years, dressed up for Navy days. Returning to Weymouth, we see a view of Weymouth Station, taken about 1860. A view taken in the 1920s. Until 1909, all Portland branch trains had to propel in and out of the Weymouth terminus. When originally built, it was on the edge of town, and Radipole Lake was alongside the line. The original edge of the lake being alongside the harbour tramway, with the bridge of the Portland Railway in the foreground. A close-up view of Weymouth Junction signal box. The wooden viaduct became a rickety structure in its later years as a train of 4-wheelers cross it. A view from a house in Alma Road with a train bound for Portland. With the railway line in the foreground, this view was taken from White Road. One can clearly see, since the 1870s when this photograph was taken, how much Weymouth has developed. The original wooden ferry bridge. This was replaced in 1903 by a steel structure. And a very early view of Portland Station with BT Well Tank Nelson stood at the platform. An exterior view of the original station buildings, until 1905 being the passenger station, serving the remainder of its life as a goods depot. A platform view pre-1905. A London and South Western Railway coach stands to the right. As we move to the left, we see the original goods shed. Rodwell Station opened in 1870. The signal box was added later. Although single track and no passing facilities were provided, the section could be broken into two, allowing extra trains to run during busy periods. A delightful turn-of-a-century view of the station, the signal box with passengers and the staff. And a diagram of the signalling of a station. Upon leaving Rodwell Station, the line was in a deep cutting climbing towards Buxton Road Bridge. In 1891, the Whitehead torpedo factory was built at White Regis, a siding being provided to serve the works. The new steel viaduct built across the Fleet, photographed during 1951 with a Weymouth bound train crossing. The Eastern and Church Hope Railway Company was formed in 1867, the original plan being for a line from the centre of the island moving down the map to the bottom right at Church Hope Cove, where an incline similar to the one at Castletown would have enabled stone to be shipped out. However, this plan was quickly dropped, and it was decided to link up with the Weymouth line on a long climb around the east side of the island. The line was to join up with the Dockyard Railway. However, there were many financial difficulties. Several Acts of Parliament and extensions of time were necessary before the line was finally opened. As can clearly be seen, the engineering work on this section of line was extensive. Construction taking place north of Eastern Station at Sheepcroft. The construction in progress at Eastern Station. The contractor's locomotive stands to the left. A later photograph showing the work nearing completion. Unfortunately, when the line was examined by the Board of Trade in 1900, the inspector found it unsuitable for passenger traffic, and for the next 2 years goods traffic only worked the line. The crew of a G6 class locomotive at Eastern Station. And a G6 departing with the Weymouth bound goods. Eventually the line opened to passenger traffic in 1902, and this comic postcard appeared. So long had been the delay. Hardly had the new station been opened when a year later, in 1903, the station was destroyed by fire. This was followed shortly after by a collision caused by runaway wagons. And in 1907 a landslip under Grove Point closed the line for a period of time. With the opening of the line to passenger traffic, the Board of Trade would not allow trains to reverse in and out of the old Portland station, so a temporary platform was built on the curve leading towards Castletown, complete with signal boxes shown here. In 1903, work started on a new station on the curve, this opening to passenger traffic in 1905. A general view of a new station as seen from the Victoria Gardens. Note at this time there were no oil tanks on the mere. A view taken from Chesil Beach at the same period, the original signal box of 1878 being in the left foreground. Directly above it is a new Portland Station signal box in 1905. Note the water to the left, now the site of the heliport. A close-up view taken pre-1914. Rodwell Station was extended in 1907. A new platform and loop was added on the upside and a new footbridge provided. Also a new signal box and waiting shelter. The modernised station, complete with the original buildings of 1870. In 1909 a new girder bridge was constructed across Radipo Lake, a view from the southwest, and a view from the northeast with the new Malcolm Regis station. Malcolm Regis station viewed from the end of King Street, the foreground later being reclaimed to form Malcolm Regis Gardens. A delightful view about 1910 of a Portland bound train waiting to leave the station. Also opened in 1909 was Westham Holt, a view taken shortly before its closure in 1952. (1909) also saw the opening of White Regis Holt, adjacent to the torpedo factory, Wyke in those days being a village 1 mile north of the railway. During the Great War, a small 60-foot halt was built near the Naval Hospital on the section of line between Portland Station and Portland Dockyard. We now move into the 1930s and take a look at Portland Station during that period. A glimpse of Sandfoot Castle Holt, opened in 1932. Stone traffic was very important. Here we see stone being loaded into wagons at a quarry, and a 1938 view of wagons being shunted out of Perryfield sidings. Behind can be seen what is now the Royal Manor School. The stone companies also had their own wagons, a truck owned by the Bath and Portland Stone Company. A view of a train climbing the Marsh Embankment. Note the gaps in the centre of the carriages. These were gate sets. Instead of having conventional doors, there was a gap with a wrought iron gate. Unfortunately, these coaches were destroyed during the war. A naval special from Portland passes Westham Holt, and a return working from Portsmouth later in the day. The Portland branch was damaged several times during the war. Here we see a bomb crater at Portland Station. Portland's signal box was destroyed in 1940, being replaced by this wartime structure on the left. The station building at Rodwell received a direct hit. It was replaced by the concrete waiting shelter seen on the right hand side. At White Regis, a temporary road was laid alongside the railway and over the railway bridge in case the adjacent road bridge was hit. During 1949, severe gales caused flooding to undermine the line at the Weymouth end of the oil tanks. This caused a derailment. Littlefield Crossing, Abbotsbury Road, Weymouth, showing the gates that were replaced after the war. The wicket gates on the right were not replaced. The subway, built in the 1920s, is to the left. Returning to Easton, we look at some pre-war views. Following the improvement to motorbus services after the war, the passenger service was poorly patronised. This photograph was taken in 1950, 2 years before closure. And even when this photograph was taken the following year, the flower beds were neatly attended at Easton Station. In the line's final year, 2 former Isle of Sheppey articulated sets worked on the line. These carriages having formerly been part of articulated steam rail motor units of the former South Eastern and Chatham Railway. Time was now running out for the line. It was to close as on and from the 3rd of March 1952 to all passenger traffic. As there was no Sunday service to Easton, the last trains ran over that section on Saturday the 1st of March. Guard Bailey, one of the regular guards, stands by the train. On the Saturday the 1st of March, so many people wanted to travel to Easton, double heading was the rule of the day. This was the last time 2 02 class locomotives would storm up the incline to Easton. At Easton Station, the Portland branch station master, Mr. Gemby, stands on the extreme left. The line now only handled goods traffic, for there was still a considerable amount of stone and dockyard stores running over the line. Although several naval specials were run during 1953 and 1955, no more passenger trains ran on the line until 1956, when an enthusiast special, the Wessex Wyvern, visited the branch. This was followed in 1958 by 30107 and M7, the first time one of these locomotives had worked over the line. and in April of 1959 the last royal train travelled from Portland conveying Her Majesty the Queen and Prince Charles. Melcombe Regis Station was kept in reasonable condition, being used on summer Saturdays as an overflow station for Weymouth. Littlefield Crossing and its gates were repainted. They were still kept in first-class order. The station at Rodwell in the meantime had been demolished and the signal box removed. Rodwell Tunnel, only one track on the right hand side being in use. 1962, track laying taking place along the causeway towards Portland. One would assume the line's future was safe. In 1963, a landslide near Sandsfoot caused a suspension of services for several days. In 1964, it was announced that the line would close completely to goods traffic, and in April 1965 this took place. By this time, Midland Region 262 tanks were handling the goods trains. The morning goods is seen climbing the Marsh embankment and storming through the remains of Rodwell Station. To mark the closure of the line, 3 special passenger trains ran in the march. Here we see the final train waiting to depart from Euston Station, with a 262 tank at each end. We will now look at a cine film made by the late Richard Gosling of this event. And as the gates of Littlefield Crossing close on the train for the last time as it runs back into Melcombe Regis Station, the Weymouth and Portland Railway ends 7 months short of its centenary. The remains of Portland Station. Within a year, track lifting had started on the eastern section. The sad scene in the March of 1966. A pipeline was laid along a track bed between the dockyard and the site of Portland Station. 1969 saw the demolition of Littlefield Crossing. And during 1974 the magnificent viaduct across Radipo Lake was removed. During the construction of King Street Roundabout, some of the timbers of the 1865 viaduct were dug up, having been buried when that part of the lake was filled in. Shortly after, the brick arch at the old Westham Coach Park was removed for construction of the Weymouth bypass. 1987 saw the removal of Newstead Road Arch to allow road improvements. The Portland Railway Hotel still stands. Unfortunately, its name has been changed. More unfortunate was the choice of engine used by the signwriter. Today, all we have are memories, photographs and a few tickets to remind us of when a trip to Portland by train was a scenic delight, and when the line was of national importance.